The brain center at Whipple's features a seemingly timeless theme that might be even more appropriate now. Rod Serling's fight for the everyman continued on through another Richard Donner-directed episode that wears its passion on its sleeve. But does that passion yield a personal recommendation? Wallace V. Whipple is the owner of his family's manufacturing corporation. His recent ideas for cost-saving measures greatly upset his plant manager and longtime employee, Mr. Hanley. Hanley previously worked for Whipple's father, a man who always put his workers ahead of his company's growth. This Whipple plans on reducing almost all his company's manpower by replacing them with new-age automated machines. He gives his workers a 4-month notice, but along with thousands of others about to be out of a job, a foreman named Dickerson has had enough. He gets drunk one evening and returns to the plant in order to destroy a machine said to replace 77 men. He's caught in the act, and a scuffle ensues, resulting in Dickerson being shot by a gun Whipple pulled off a security guard. Dickerson survives, but Hanley has seen too much. He admonishes the CEO, quitting while simultaneously being fired and replaced by a newly bought machine. The layoffs proceed as planned, and Whipple is left with only a few key employees. It's hard to watch this episode nowadays and not think about how artificial intelligence has encroached upon, or in some cases been forced upon, our everyday life and has already begun to replace certain jobs. Part of this, as the Twilight Zone story points out, is just progress.
A lot of men out of work.
That, unfortunately, is progress, Hanley.
At this point, it's inevitable, but I'd be hard-pressed to say that AI has been rolled out responsibly. When it comes to the arts, this is especially true, and will continue to likely get worse until some legal regulations are put in place. To some degree, this kind of thing can be traced back to the Industrial Revolution. Blue-collar jobs are lost to emerging technology, which is what makes this story so evergreen. In the brain center at Whipple's, we see the worst-case scenario, exaggerated in Rod's signature methodical style. An uncaring and heartless decision-maker so consumed with staying on the cutting edge and saving money that he fails to ask himself if he should be doing what he's doing just because he can.
Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
To be fair, it's not an enviable spot to be in. If you're responsible for thousands of families' livelihoods, as Whipple is, you have the responsibility to balance the health of your business with the effect you may have on other people's lives and futures. Those kinds of positions are usually lose-lose. No matter what you do, others will question your decision-making abilities and always be fighting for what they think is best. But even with a leader who listens, making the best possible choice for everyone is never easy. It usually comes at a cost, and at least one group is bound to be upset. The best-case scenario is never best for every person. What the Whipple character encapsulates is all the wrong decisions. His eye is only on the bottom line. He doesn't consider the human element like his father did, and he is straight up cruel to his plant manager, which ends up trickling down to his employees lower on the totem pole.
The regret for the wholesale firings of men who have worked here from 20 to 30 years.
I'll tell you what, Hanley, have a sign made for your desk. It'll say, Mr. Walter Hanley, plant manager in charge of regrets. The plant foreman, Dickerson. Yeah, Dickerson, that's his name. Hold his hand, dry his eyes, pat him on the head, but get him up here.
Hanley is the voice of the voiceless here. He tries to speak up for everyone who's going to be directly affected by this crass decision. Is it in the company's best interest to continue on as Whipple's father did, sacrificing growth and falling behind his competitors just to keep his workers employed? If any business is going to thrive and succeed into the future, they need to adapt with the times and make changes that won't be popular. It's how far Whipple goes in the emotionless direction of progress that makes him so hateable.
It's merely progress, Mr. Dickerson, progress. Out with the old, in with the new. Automation. 2 of those machines replace 114 men that take no coffee breaks, no sick leaves, no vacations with pay. And that, in my book, Mr. Dickerson, is worth considerably more than you are.
Men have to eat and work, and you can't pack them in Cosmoline like surplus tanks, or put them out to pasture like old bulls.
Dickerson represents the disgruntled worker well. Again, he's an exaggerated caricature, but he serves his purpose. When we're left to feel insignificant, when our best efforts aren't only underappreciated but completely ignored and wiped out just in the name of progress, It's a bad deal for any workforce, and I'd go as far to say society in general. It breeds contempt and widens the gap between the classes. Progress should bring as many people along with it as possible, not leave most of us in its wake. Serling knew this all too well, and you can see those sentiments splashed into his script. While I think the concepts and ideas put forth here are important and still resonate, I'm not a huge fan of the brain center at Whipple's execution. Richard Donner gives us a few interesting shots and portrays tension well in the scene where Dickerson is fired upon, but his skills aren't given much room to breathe in such an underplayed story. Richard Deacon has a unique presence with his overpronounced and enunciated delivery combined with his deeper voice, but I would have loved to have seen a few more sequences that showcase the negative effects being isolated has on him. We only really get one or two, and it's not nearly enough for the payoff we were building towards. Paul Newland as Hanley gave us someone to root for in a decent performance, and Ted DeCorsia as Dickerson brought the intensity and anger needed to epitomize worker frustrations. DeCorsia popped up back in Season 1's The 16mm Shrine. Also, Shawn Michaels is totally unrecognizable as the bartender. One of the few technicians left argues with Whipple over trivializing human concerns. He also quits and walks out, leaving Wallace alone with his machines. The technology soon turns on the CEO, malfunctioning and repeating his former employees' harsh criticisms of his way of doing business. At a bar sometime later, a distraught Whipple runs into Hanley, who says he's mostly enjoying retirement. Wallace admits that he was fired by his company's board of directors. He goes on and on about how it isn't fair that he's been replaced. With no family or home life, he has nothing. Cutting to his old office, we see a robot has taken Whipple's job. It spins his familiar keychain as irony wins the day. Robbie the Robot returned for his final Twilight Zone appearance as Whipple's replacement. Funnily enough, he seems to be taking on similar characteristics to his predecessor, just like in Uncle Simon. He also has his original headpiece back from Forbidden Planet. While the ending with the robot is funny in its absurdity, it lacks the punch that it should have hit with. What's missing here is a sequence with Whipple getting fired from his company. The sequence with him and Hanley at the bar is such a cop-out. He explains what's happened instead of us getting the satisfaction of seeing it firsthand. This dude acted like a total jackass the entire runtime, laying off thousands of people. He shot a guy. They went out of their way to make him as unlikable as possible. We needed to watch him receive his just desserts. It's such a lame finish. The Brain Center at Whipple's is an installment that has lived on in pop culture through music and TV. Jordan Peele's recent reboot of the series supposedly drops the Whipple name in several episodes. I say supposedly since I couldn't finish the first season when I tried. Regardless of its memorability and strong themes, I don't recommend checking this one out unless you're more of a completionist. It's a lot of somewhat underwhelming buildup for a lackluster payoff. The Whipple Manufacturing Company can continue to pump out subpar products in a forgotten factory in the depths of the Twilight Zone.